Many thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. We've all heard this before, that gear doesn't matter. And for the most part, I agree. There are a lot more important things than the brand of camera you photograph with, or maybe how many bells and whistles it has. But I recently encountered a situation that I was directly impacted by, a situation that now has me thinking that, maybe gear actually does matter. Now, I've never been one to upgrade just for the sake of upgrading, or one to chase, camera manufacturer spec cycles. Rather, I'm more concerned with solving or resolving real-life problems and limitations, photographically speaking, of course, that I encounter with my current camera setup. And if the problem is great enough and can be solved with an upgraded camera or an upgraded lens, then I'll contemplate the new purchase. But if the aforementioned scenario doesn't come to fruition, then it's a no-go for me. Because at the end of the day, it's as if the camera industry is designed to keep us poor. They want us to constantly upgrade our cameras and lenses, even if the perceived upgrade provides no easily identifiable improvement to the end result or doesn't solve a problem or limitation that we're currently having. But every once in a while, we encounter a situation that can be solved by a new piece of gear. And when that happens, well, it's an absolutely beautiful thing. So I'm gonna roll this real quick clip. It's maybe 60 or 90 seconds, it's real short, that provides the backstory of the situation I encountered when I was in Colorado a couple of months ago. Then I'm going to show you the resulting raw file from this little excursion, if you will, versus the final edit I shared in the video, as the difference is pretty mind-blowing and it clearly shows the limitation or the problem that I have.
From a lot of experimentation, I've determined that this is about as close as I can get to this leaf. I'm zoomed all the way in, so I am still pretty close, but I can still get a good focus here. And then there's such high resolution in this camera, I'll be able to crop in quite a bit as well. But the detail on this little leaf is absolutely incredible. And like I mentioned a few moments ago, the dew on it is frozen, and all of the vegetation around it is frozen as well. So there's all this kind of frost. There's just tons of detail in the scene. And I'm focused on the actual leaf at f/16 on a medium format camera, and I'm also focused on the grass around it, because I'm not 100% certain from a depth of field perspective if I'll need to focus stack it. If I do, it'll just need to be a two-shot focus stack, but I want to be able to have that information so that I can go back and post if I need it when I get back home. So regardless how this turns out, like I mentioned, I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I'll flash it on the screen here. I feel like there's a 60-40 chance that this is going to be a decent image, but I'll show it on the screen right now.
So here is the final edit of the frozen leaf photo from that trip in Colorado. I'm pretty happy with the way that it did come out, but there are definitely some flaws in this photograph. But overall, I like the overall concept, the overall idea, the frozen autumn leaf. I love everything about it, but the execution and the gear that I had really posed a lot of challenges, and I'll show you exactly why. So here is the final edit, and here is the raw file right here. And you can, as I toggle this back and forth, you can see exactly how much I had to crop this, and I cropped all the way in to about this area right here. Let me hit the shortcut key I just to show you this real quick. This is the raw file, 11,648 pixels by 8,736 pixels, which is 102 megapixel file. That is the raw file here. If I go to the crop image, it is now 1898 by 1898, which means that this final image is now under 4 megapixels. So that just goes to show you, I had to crop in a 102 megapixel file all the way down to almost 4 megapixels in order to get this macro style image right here. And that poses a big problem. Now, I was able to get away with this because I only shared this photo on social media. I shared it on Instagram, I think I shared it on Facebook and maybe Twitter and Vero, and you can't see those kind of things on social media. Those images are already compressed so much, so you can really get away with those kind of things. But if I were to print this photograph, there's just no way that you could get away with that. And when I zoom all the way in here, you can see how much this file really starts to break down. But on social media, you really can't see those kind of things. So the limitation that I was having is the fact that I didn't even own a macro lens. And I've done this before a couple times with the GFX 100S, which is my favorite camera I've ever used. Medium format, 102 megapixel monster of a camera. But I've done this to where, I find a nice kind of flat lay scene, and you zoom in as much as you can get your lens to focus as close as you can. And then since the camera is such a high resolution camera, you do have the ability to crop in quite a bit. And you can get away with those kind of things on social media because you really can't see the actual difference. But if I had an actual macro lens, which I do now, I'm testing this out right here, this tiny little lens. This is the new 30mm f2.8 macro lens from Fuji. I've never used a macro lens. The video I posted last week was my first attempt at doing it. I had an absolute blast, and it really did open up a world of possibilities for me. Just being able to actually create those macro style photographs as they are designed, being able to get right up close to an object and pick up all of those details without having to create the illusion of a macro image by cropping all the way in. And what's really cool about this is, one, this thing is tiny. I don't want to add really any more weight to my bag. This thing, it weighs absolutely nothing. It takes up no additional room really in my bag. It's I think it's a $600 lens, which $600 is still $600, but in the grand scheme of lenses today, $600 is on the lesser expensive side. So between those things, the fact that it fills a gap, it fills a void, it solves a problem, it solves a limitation that I had in my current setup. It doesn't really add a lot of additional weight to my bag. It's not going to cost me another $2,000 or $3,000. All of those things combined lead me to believe that more than likely I will probably purchase this, because this lens right here will go on my Fuji X-T4 that I'm filming on right now, which is my complementary setup to my GFX 100S. So that right there, I think, is a fantastic example, kind of an obvious example of when gear matters. I didn't have something, I do have something now that fills a gap and fills a void and solves a problem that I'm having. Now, another example of this is I am recently testing out the brand new Fuji X-T5, which is an absolutely fantastic camera. And I mentioned in last week's video that the thing that I am most excited about with this camera is that it bumps up the X-T4's resolution from 26 megapixels to 40 megapixels, and that's a big jump. But as I mentioned earlier, these specs only matter really if you can see this perceived difference, if it's really an easily identifiable difference. And I have a couple comparisons. I took an image with the X-T4 that I'm filming on right now, and the same image with the X-T5, and the differences are pretty shocking. I was kind of surprised. So let me open these both up here, and we'll compare them. As you can see up here, this is the X-T5, this is the X-T4. Both of these are RAW files. You can see that this one right here, if you multiply those numbers together, this is a 40 megapixel file. This right here is a 26 megapixel file. And if you look at it on the surface level as they are, you cannot see any difference. If we zoom in, let's zoom all the way into a ridiculous amount. Let's say, let's kind of try and size these up as close as I can here. I think something to about maybe right here. Looks pretty even right there. And yes, I can see a little bit more detail in the X-T5. The 40 megapixel file, the detail looks a little bit sharper, the contrast looks a little bit better. The details definitely come out just a little bit better. But I would think from 40 megapixels to 26 megapixels that difference would be a little bit larger. And on paper, it does seem like a substantial difference. But even when I zoom into these insane levels, look up here at the thumbnail, you can see how far I'm zoomed into this file. Even at these insane levels, you really can't see a difference. And you definitely can't see a difference when you look at them like this. So this is kind of that issue, you know, does gear really matter? Now, one of the other big benefits of the X-T5 is it supposedly has a much better autofocus system. I'm a landscape photographer. Autofocus is not super important to me, or fast autofocus isn't super important, but I use the X-T4 or maybe the X-T5 as a hybrid camera to shoot all the video for this channel. So autofocus is very important. And a problem that I have with the X-T4 that I'm filming on right now is sometimes that autofocus, I'm sure you've seen it before, is a little hit and miss, especially when you get into a woodland situation where there's a lot of stuff going on behind me. A lot of times that autofocus can't lock onto my face. So if the autofocus in this, the X-T5, is substantially better than the X-T4, then that right there solves a serious problem that I'm having, and that might be worth upgrading in itself. But the perceived, I guess, bump in resolution, because I felt to myself that the 26 megapixel on the X-T4 is okay, but I would like it to be a little bit better because I use that for stills work sometimes. But I thought that the 40 megapixels would solve that problem, and it really doesn't, and it kind of makes me realize that, you know what, the 26 megapixels on the X-T4 is more than enough, and if you bump it all the way up to 40, you really can't see that perceived difference right there. So I'm a little bit on the fence as to whether or not I'm going to purchase the X-T5 or upgrade, but I love the fact that the XT series pairs very, very well with the GFX 100S series, because these right here complement each other very well for my workflow. I always have to have two cameras. One that is my primary camera for stills, and the other camera is primarily, or it's a hybrid, but is mostly used for video work, but I like to be able to use it for stills from time to time as well. So to get back to the question, the purpose of the video, does gear actually matter? And I think it does in certain scenarios. So if the scenario where gear doesn't matter is when it doesn't solve a problem that you're having. So if I'm not having any problems with my X-T4's autofocus system, then this right here, this gear doesn't matter. This X-T5 is not going to create any type of easily identifiable improvement to my work. So this situation, gear would not matter. I think gear does matter, however, when it solves a very specific problem, like the macro scenario lens. I did not own a macro lens. I was creating this kind of band-aid or this work around workflow to create the illusion of a macro image. And this right here, not going to break the bank, doesn't add a lot of weight and size to my bag. So this right here, I think this is a scenario where gear actually does matter. So I think that, you know, and I wanted to make this video around the holidays. More camera gear is purchased in the month of December than any month of the year. And I think it's really important because, as you can imagine, the questions that I get most often are almost always about camera gear. And I swear 9 times out of 10, people are upgrading just for the sake of upgrading. And they're not actually thinking about, is this upgrade going to be a real upgrade? Or is this just me just chasing the spec cycles that these camera manufacturers are creating? If it solves a problem that you're currently having, and the upgrade creates an easily identifiable solution or something that you can easily tell the difference, then yeah, gear matters. But if you're just upgrading for the sake of upgrading, gear does not matter. So I hope that that was helpful. And like I said, it's the question that I get most often has to do with camera gear, and it always has to do with whether or not one should upgrade to this or one should upgrade to that. So before I do wrap up this week's video, just a real quick word from this week's sponsor, which is Squarespace, who I use for all of my website and e-commerce needs. Squarespace provides a dynamic and attractive online platform to create your website. You can display your photography using Squarespace's professional portfolio designs and customize the layout and look and feel of your gallery just so you can make it your own. With Squarespace's traffic overview feature, you can track trends in page visits and views to better optimize your content, and you can even grow and engage with your customers with Squarespace's email campaign tools, which will enable you to create engaging emails that match your website with your products or blog post and logo, just so your messaging remains consistent. So if you're looking to start a new website or possibly upgrade your current website, check out squarespace.com/MarkDenney for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase. So I really do hope you enjoyed this week's video. It's something that I've been looking forward to talking about for a while, how the camera industry is designed to keep us poor. It's exactly how I feel sometimes when every year they're like dangling these carrots in all of our faces of, oh, look at this new shiny this new shiny that. And from my experience, most of the time, those upgrades don't create that easily identifiable difference. And in those scenarios, I just don't think gear really does matter. So a little bit of food for thought if you're looking to upgrade something, a camera or lens or something to that effect this holiday season. I hope this video provides you with a little bit of a thought track to kind of put in place, if you will. If you have any questions about anything, please leave those in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to get back in touch with you as soon as possible. And if you enjoyed this week's video, if you could give it a thumbs up, and as always, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. Share the video with your friends or maybe your local photo club. I got it right this time, and I definitely would appreciate it. And as always, I thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today, and I will see you all next Wednesday. Bye.